Some of you I've talked to before. I've been here. This is my 6th visit to campus, my 11th to New Hampshire. I'm from Laguna Beach, California, which is about an hour south of Los Angeles. I am seriously looking at running for President of the United States. My name is Fred Karger. I've spent a lifetime in politics since I was about 4 or 6 years old. I'm what you call a political junkie. We need that fix. We need like a heroin junkie or something. We need that fix of politics to really keep us going. And when we're away from it, we miss it. I wanted to talk today a little bit about my background. Then I want to talk about some issues a little bit. I'm going to make a major pronouncement today, which I want to do here in front of you at Dartmouth, because I think it could be a topic for discussion in the presidential election cycle and beyond. And first, just a little bit about myself. We've got a couple commercials I'm going to play. This is something very different. I go by the moniker Fred Who. We printed up these stickers, and you'll see the banner when we figure the tape out. It's Fred Who, because as I started coming up here, which I began on my very first trip to New Hampshire in the very end of February, beginning of March, I spent about a week here, traveled all over, introducing myself, and it's, well, Fred Who? And so anyway, people kind of gave me that idea. And then I found out later Jimmy Carter did the same thing when he was campaigning here, Jimmy Who, and it worked well for him. I am a legacy of sorts. My grandfather, my mother's father, went to Dartmouth 100 years ago, and kind of I'd always heard of Dartmouth. I'd never visited here. I never knew my grandfather. He passed away 4 years before I was born. He was Jewish, which was pretty unusual. In 1913, 1914, he was in a Sigma Chi fraternity house, kind of a pioneer. Not quite sure how that happened, but it was a little unusual. He was from a pretty prominent banking family in Chicago, and he and both his brothers went here. And I don't know if he graduated or not. We were actually trying to look at the yearbooks at lunch at the end to see if they go back that far, but 33 was the farthest back we could find. Anyway, his name was Alfred Foreman. His father, Edwin Foreman, had a bank in Chicago and was the first president and started this, it's called the Jewish Alliance of Chicago, then became the Jewish Federation of Chicago. It concerned itself with Jewish immigrants coming into the United States at the turn of the last century who faced job discrimination, employment and housing discrimination. A lot of places that Jews could not live and were not welcome, and then also were subjected to hate crimes. If I run, would run as the first openly gay candidate in history of this country. And my community faces similar employment discrimination, housing discrimination, hate crime. And there are bills now that weren't around 100 years ago that are actually in certain states and municipalities and maybe even the federal level. There was a hate crimes bill this last year, the Matthew Shepard Act, that the Congress did pass. So somewhat parallel, in the Jewish community in those days was trying to assimilate. The gay community is trying to assimilate. I say we just want to be like everybody else, get married, have kids, live in the suburbs, nice family existences. And I think that's really all people are looking to do. There are a lot of people who are against that concept and feel that it is not a good way to live your life for a variety of reasons, and have stigmatized a lot of gay people and want to either have them not be gay or make them feel terrible and create barriers to their happiness. And it's interesting timing now because, as I say, this is my 11th trip to New Hampshire. This is one of the 5 gay marriage states in the country, and it happened through the state legislature and signed by the governor after compromise, and of course is held in great reverence by my community and a lot of people, fair-minded people all over the United States. I'm from California, which is considered a very progressive state. We had marriage. You may have heard of Proposition 8, and it was yanked away. And so to go to places like Iowa, where I've been spending a lot of time, that is a gay marriage state, New Hampshire and Vermont and Connecticut and Massachusetts, now Washington, D.C. is wonderful for me. I became active in this fight later in life and had a lot to do with that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. My life has kind of paralleled this civil rights movement. of my community. When I first realized I was gay at about 18 years old, or started, acting on it, there wasn't even really a word gay. There were two people who we assumed were gay. One was a guy named Liberace, who was a very flamboyant performer, talented pianist, and performed in Vegas a lot, but just, used to fly in sequin outfits, and he knew he was gay even though he wasn't out. And then there was another guy named Paul Lynde, who was a comedian. If you ever watch an old show called Bewitched, he was Uncle Arthur, thank you. And he was on the Hollywood Squares game show. He was the center square. Very funny guy, very biting, very kind of flamboyant too in his humor and actions. And he was gay. So I was like, okay, Fred, you're going to be like Liberace or Paul Lynde. And I thought those were my two choices. And there were no athletes, there were no actors, there were no role models that I knew of. And so it was a pretty lonely feeling, pretty frightening time, and there were no gay-straight alliances. There was nothing. I was the only person, I thought, for, in my high school and in my town, my college, and everything else. So it was a pretty tough time, and in those days, you're just better off, keeping your secret. And I became a pretty good actor at doing that, and I learned to live this double life for many, many years. And actually, after a brief career as an actor, which I did, I went to the University of Denver and graduated there, not with any great honors. I was having a tough time in college for that, and I was kind of a wild student. During the wild 70s, we had the Vietnam War going on, we had demonstrations, and it was kind of a turbulent time in this country, to put it mildly. And after that, I moved to California because I thought my secret would be safer than Chicago, where I grew up. And I did a little acting and was in a few commercials, was on a bunch of television shows in the 70s, and I was just actually starting to make it. And I decided I wanted to follow my passion, which was politics. And I'd worked in politics since I was a little kid. I volunteered on a couple campaigns. I was telling this, I don't want to go over too much, but the very first campaign I worked on in a major way was for Nelson Rockefeller. Sure, we're going to have the unveiling. We need a drum roll here. This is oh, look at that. That's me with a little retouching and out the glasses. We got to make an official appearance here at Rocky Center. But it was Nelson Rockefeller, for whom this building is named, was my very first campaign. I used to take the train from the suburbs of Chicago into the city to work on phone banks as a 14-year-old kid, which was a little unusual then and now. But I just had this love of politics. I was accepted. I shined at it. Wasn't a very good athlete, not a great student, but suddenly in politics, I found my calling, I guess. And it was a great experience, and one that I stuck with. When I was younger and out of college, it was not a career. It is now. There are a lot of political consultants. There are a lot of kids out there, when they want to grow up, want to work in politics. It was just generally done by volunteers then. So I spent kind of my formative years very curious, and then ended up working in a political consulting firm that I was hired for 3 months to, was careful of the head.
Exactly.
There we go. It looks good. So that's entertaining. Well, and I went to work for a company called the Dolphin Group, and we worked on political campaigns. The founder was a guy named Bill Roberts, who ran political campaigns for a living, and he and his partner Stu Spencer ran Reagan's first 2 campaigns for governor. They kind of made Ronald Reagan. They came up with the name citizen politician. They pioneered television advertising. This is in 1966. They pioneered survey research, which is very common then in commercial, consumer products, things like that, but never in politics. And he had told me, he thought, well, if we know what the voters are thinking, we can direct our message to that. And of course, we know what polling and how prominent that is in politics now, probably a little too much so that a lot of people change positions based on the polls. But he pioneered that. I went to work for him in 1977 for 3 months. I retired 27 years later, 7 years ago, and spent my time in my passion. It kind of saved me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like a lot of students out of college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Anyway, I found my love, and it was a great career. We did variety campaigns. I worked on Reagan's re-election campaign in '88 in a major capacity. I'd worked on Gerald Ford's campaign in 1976, who was running against Reagan, or Reagan running against him rather. And we did a special project affecting a neighboring state governor, Michael Dukakis, who was running against George H.W. Bush. And it's gotten me this nickname, which is in some of the stories now, Dark Arts Operator. And what is that? In a political campaign, you have, we either say two kinds of campaigns, or two reasons for someone voting. It's either for one guy or against another guy. Well, our firm and I became pretty expert at giving people a reason to vote against someone. And that's called opposition research. Some will call it negative campaigning. Usually you'll find a candidate standing up here or wherever saying, we're going to run a positive campaign. Well, don't necessarily believe that because, a lot of politicians like to say that, but behind every successful campaigning candidate, there's usually the opposition research side. And it doesn't mean, going after people in their personal lives or something, but, certainly the issues, the records, if, there are some problems that kind of show an example of an individual and his or her philosophies, it's good to discuss. So for instance, I'll tell you this story. In 1988, George H.W. Bush was running for president. He'd been vice president under Reagan. We had done independent expenditure committees before, and we were not officially asked, but it was indicated it might be good. We had done this in '84 for the Republican National Committee against Walter Mondale, who ran against Reagan. We were kind of asked to do something similar, but do it independently. So Bill Roberts, my mentor, whom I worked with side by side for 11 years and learned everything from, this brilliant guy, he and I were just planning this thing. It was going to be something against Michael Dukakis, who had been the governor and was the governor of Massachusetts, running for president, at that point become the Democrat nominee. And we had worked on a campaign in California to, it was a confirmation election for our California Supreme Court. There were 3 justices, very similar to what just happened in Iowa, actually. Death penalty was a big issue then. And so we conducted a campaign using crime victims to tell the story. And it was, they were very effective. These are people in the '80s, the crime victims movement really began, where cities and states were officially, granting them great care, psychological care, financial, remedies for the crimes. And these were the murder victims and families that we were working with. Well, anyway, when Michael Dukakis became the nominee of the party, it came out in a Reader's Digest story that he had furloughed a prisoner, a guy named Willie Horton. Have you heard of this? He was a convicted murderer in Massachusetts, put away for life, and was furloughed under this kind of modern '80s type of program. If you let somebody out for a weekend and he or she might get a taste of being free and turn around. Well, Willie Horton didn't do that on his weekend furlough. He went to Maryland and he broke into a house. There was a woman there. He raped her and terrorized her for hours. When her fiance came home, he tied him up, tortured him, brutalized him, would rape his fiance in front of him. It was like a 36-hour horror of this convicted murderer who should not have been let out. And this Reader's Digest broke the story. We had not heard of it. And anyway, we contacted the victims. And it was a woman who was in that story named Donna Cuomo from Massachusetts, whose 16-year-old brother had been murdered by Horton, who was a gas station attendant, and 16-year-old, he killed him. And then after that, a couple, Cliff and Angie Barnes, who later married, who had been the victims on the other end of the Horton crime spree. So we contacted those crime victims and asked them if they would consider becoming involved. And we had worked very successfully with several hundred crime victims of murders and heinous crimes in California. So we had a good reputation, and they checked us out, and we asked them to come forward. And they came to California. We had a press conference in San Diego. We put together a committee. I got Steve Garvey, who some of you may have heard of, was a huge, he's not in the Hall of Fame yet, but he had a little problem, but he was a great sports figure, first baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers, later for the San Diego Padres. Revered guy, very popular, rumored to be running for office and interested in politics, and this was right after he'd retired from the Padres, so we got him to chair this effort and help us with the fundraising. Anyway, we worked with these victims, and we took them all over the country. We had press conferences in Chicago and New York, all over Texas, all over California that day. And it was interesting timing because in the 1988 election, George Bush had picked Dan Quayle as his vice presidential nominee that no one had ever heard of. He was an obscure younger senator from Indiana, and he looked like a great pick. He was kind of the first of the baby boomers of my generation. And this is, 23 years ago. And suddenly, and so suddenly it looked like a good choice. Well, it turned out that Quayle had a lot of problems. He'd gotten out of the military through family connections, and I don't know, he'd kind of stumbled around, and he had a debate with the Democrat nominee, Senator Lloyd Bentsen. Anyway, Lloyd Bentsen just cleaned his clock, and he came off of this terrible, I think it was on a Tuesday night, it was the one vice presidential debate, and all the talk turned back to Quayle from Willie Horton, which had been discussed. Well, on that Friday, we had our press conference in San Diego, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. We made commercials with the victims, and it was the lead story on the national news, and it suddenly became the subject again. It turned back to Willie Horton and away from Dan Quayle. And it was a very crucial time. And the judge in those days, this was before the 24-hour news cycle and before the internet even. This is 1988. Well, all the Sunday newspapers and columns really focused on the victims and Willie Horton. So we had a lot to do in that election. Independently, we were not allowed to talk to the campaign at all. Actually, this guy Lee Atwater told us later, told my business partner, he said, I used to curse you by day and pray for you at night, which is this classic Lee Atwater. He was the strategist behind George Bush's election and a lot of the Reagan election in '84, and I worked with him closely then, but we were not allowed to talk in 1988. So we had this impact. I went and we did a lot of that. Bill had died in 1988 as this was launching, and it was kind of turned over to me. We went beyond that, and a lot of the political consultants that I know, and it was certainly a hope of ours to kind of evolve into government affairs, working with corporations. It's more stable. You can have year contracts, and we did a lot of grassroots lobbying, working with individuals, companies in need of help with government. And then after a nice long 27-year career, I had, was able to retire, not married, no kids, no college to pay for. I couldn't have done that. And so at 56, I retired. And I did my dream of not setting the alarm, of traveling all over. I'd usually take a major trip every month, and I was all over the world. And anyway, I got a little restless, and I had always said I wanted to do something significant. And I decided to get into some activism. I did in my hometown of Laguna Beach to save this historic gay bar and the gay life along with it, which had been very prominent in Laguna. And the first openly gay mayor in the country was from Laguna in 1988, Bob Gentry. I worked with him. He helped me through this process. And then Prop 8 came along, and I became very active in that, doing what I learned and did well with the Willie Horton thing. Same type of thing I did. I decided to focus on the contributors to Prop 8 who were trying to take away marriage in California. And for the first time, I brought attention to the biggest owners, a guy named Doug Manchester in San Diego, California, who's kind of the Donald Trump of San Diego. He's the biggest developer. He owns the biggest hotels. He names them after himself. It's called the Manchester Grand Hyatt. And we boycotted him. He'd given $125,000 to take marriage away to qualify, one of the first contributions. He gloated about it in the San Diego Union Tribune. And so we boycotted him, a couple others along the way. And they never gave any more money. And it sent a loud message to others. If you're going to give this, not just $100 or $1,000 or just a vote, but if you're going to give, like in this guy's case, $125,000, or one of his buddies, this Terry Castor, owns a self-storage company, gave $693,000, that's pretty significant. And I don't want to, rent a self-storage locker from A1 Self-Storage. I don't want to stay at the Manchester Grand Hyatt. Others may, but we led a very successful boycott against Doug Manchester. By his own admission, his public relations director told me at a conference that they were losing $1 million a month, and that has only gotten worse. And while I don't wish ill on anyone, I want to send a message to Doug Manchester, who, when I did this, threatened if I did this, they were going to get $1 million. And he had that ability. I was like, great, you give $100, which is reportable. There's going to be riots in front of your hotel, because there was a lot of anger at that point when that happened. So anyway, that's what I've been doing. And then in the course of that, I came up with a crazy idea, which is why I'm standing here today. And it was, I wonder if everything fell into place, if these boycotts, I ended up getting investigation launched and underway of the Mormon Church. I discovered their involvement in Prop 8. I filed a complaint against the National Organization for Marriage in Maine that led to an investigation. That was underway. I wanted to see who the president was, who won, how he was on LGBTQ issues. And there were about 9 different factors. I had to meet with a family last Christmas, and anyway, everything kind of fell into place. And I thought, I've got the time, got the resources, I'm going to try this. So I came on an exploratory trip to even, go to step 1. And I went to DC. I met with a lot of the gay and lesbian leadership and organizations. I went to New York, had similar meetings there, and then cousin Dave Karger drove me up because his grandmother, my aunt, lives in Peterborough, and he was going to drop me off here. We went to brunch with her and her grandchildren and everything, and I came to the Gay Straight Alliance at the University of New Hampshire one night. I came Gay Straight Alliance here one night, and I saw the hope and the interest and the commitment of college students that were just kind of enthralled that somebody who was openly gay could consider running for president. Well, the Constitution requires you to be 35 years or over, permanent resident of the United States, 14 years, and a natural-born citizen. I've got a birth certificate and everything. And so I met the qualifications. It's never been done before. There was a great pioneer who I remember because I was involved in 1972, first African-American to ever run for president, Shirley Chisholm, second-term congresswoman from New York, very presumptuous. First of all, she was a woman. Secondly, she was, hadn't been around long, so there was a lot of resentment even within the Congressional Black Caucus. She only got 1 endorsement. Ron Dellums, a congressman from Oakland. Everyone else was working against her. I've been finding similar situations and resistance from my community. If I do this, it would be as a Republican. That's what I've spent my life doing. After spending a lot of research, and I've run a lot of campaigns, so I know that part of it. I don't know the candidate side as much, although I'm learning. And so I've come up with the term independent Republican, because when I looked at the voter registration here and talked to hundreds of people in and out of politics, the 42% of the registered voters in New Hampshire are registered independent. In Iowa, where I've been spending a lot of time, 37% of the voters are independent. And so, to me, as a consultant, it shows that a lot of people are upset with the parties, that a lot of people are particularly upset with the Republican Party, because the numbers show that most of the independents have come from the Republican Party, which is not a good thing, if you're trying to build a minority party. What I want to do is do just what I'm doing, and what I've been doing for 11 months is to go to colleges. I'm going to go to high schools. I want to get younger people involved, interested. I want to make it fun and exciting. Met with the college Republicans, exclusively earlier, and I plan on doing a lot of that. I've been all over the country speaking to college Republicans, law school students, undergrads, you name it, gay straight alliances, to try and get people involved. We're going to have a fun, inclusive, exciting campaign. We're going to be doing the Frisbee giveaways. I've pledged to give a Fred Frisbee to every household in New Hampshire. We're going to do Saturday walks that I've done before. There are 2 congressional districts here. In the state, it's a walkable state, but we're not going to do the traditional door knocking, where the candidate goes and gets a door slammed in his face. I want to make this fun, and I want to do it with excitement. And so what I'm going to do when the snow melts is to organize by precinct around the state. We're going to find a house of a volunteer or some meeting place, and we'll come in maybe 10:30 on a Saturday. We're going to have coffee and Dunkin' Donuts. We're going to everybody precinct walk sheets. Has anybody done precinct walking before? Or have you worked on a couple people? And so you get a name and an address, and you generally can find out how often the person voted and political party where you go up. But instead of just doing it quietly, we're going to do it with a lot of noise. We're going to have a pickup truck full of Fred Frisbees. We're going to have a bagpipe band. We're going to have an army of people going out and just kind of blitzing neighborhoods. And it's fun and exciting, and it is retail politics. And then we're going to go back to the same house or meeting location, barbecue or pizza or whatever, and trade stories, because there'll be a lot of stories, dogs chasing you and people nice and rude and all different things. And that's what I'm doing. We're doing these Saturday after Saturday after Saturday, and maybe some weeknights when we can, and possibly Sundays. But I want to do things a little differently. I want to show you a couple commercials, because this is different too. I read the book about Obama by his campaign manager, David Plouffe. It's called Audacity to Win, and it's a brilliant book. It's a how-to guide for a long shot candidate. Don't forget he was a long shot, and it'll obviously further along than I, but they took chances. They just rolled the dice, and he says this constantly throughout the book. So as I've made decisions and thought about things, like, what if I have to lose? That's what he would say throughout his book. So anyway, what we've done, I've got and some of you were here the last time I spoke at the political forum downstairs. There's a cameraman with me, not right over, but John Keitel, who's a great documentary filmmaker, has been following me around since April. Sometimes you just wake up in the morning, that camera's on. It's really like being in a reality show or something. But he's captured everything, and he's put together 2 brilliant commercials, a third commercial, which we were going to premiere tomorrow. I'm going to be doing it with a state rep, former state rep a Democrat down in Manchester. We're going to go do a few little press things, and it's on this, the attempt to repeal the marriage here in New Hampshire. It's the National Organization for Marriage, kind of taking them on. But let me show you these 2 commercials. Kevin will run them. They're kind of what the style and what we're going to do, and it's a little bit different. It's the first one. Let's show the Good Morning New Hampshire, which debuted all over the state. We ran it on TV in a limited way back in September. All shot here. You'll recognize a few Dartmouth shots.
Hey, Katie, it's Fred Karger. Tammy, hi, this is Fred Karger. Hey, John, it's Fred Karger.
Fred who?
Hi.
That's me, Fred Karger.
I need some help from my friends here in New Hampshire.
I'm back in the Granite State.
I'm strongly considering running for president in 2012.
For president?
I heard you say something about president.
Tell me about yourself, then.
I'm an independent Republican from Laguna Beach, California.
No kidding.
I'm a Republican, so I was interested especially to hear about an independent Republican.
I've worked as a political consultant and strategist for over 30 years.
I've never run before.
I want to help bring back the American spirit, just as my old boss Ronald Reagan did.
I want to open the flaps of the tent and let everyone in.
Were you old enough for a Frisbee? I would be the candidate of bold, new ideas.
I want to shake it up a little.
I'm calling myself an independent Republican.
So am I.
But before I run for president, I need your help.
Hey!
I'm testing the waters in New Hampshire to see if I can raise some funds from my friends. That will help determine the next step. Please help me out by going to fredkarger.com.
Check out the website.
Sign up and make a contribution today.
Good luck.
Well, thank you.
Well, we'll keep an eye on you.
Nice to meet you, Fred.
Thanks, New Hampshire.
See Collis Hall here. And so that's the first commercial. I put it on right after Labor Day, which is the traditional start of the political season, only it's, the midterms, not 2012. It got quite a bit of attention. And then I did a second one for Iowa. And these are the 2 states that I've been concentrating in. Of course, they have the caucus. And so this is called Independence Day. It was right after the election. It was right after the change in the House of Representatives. So I wanted to underscore what is one of my strengths is getting along with people. And you'll see it in this spot and talking about, that I supported Democrats as well as Republicans. I'm for getting along. I think that's very important, and I think it's ready to explode in D.C. You saw the staggered seating last night and everything, but it's a little different, I think, when the dust settles. And so I think it's important. I've seen all the polling, and I've got a good gut instinct that the public wants, our elected officials to get along, and in Concord and in Washington. How are we doing on this? Looks like technical difficulties.
No, just tell me when.
Oh, okay. I was filling time. All right. So this is called
2008,
Independence
Iowans
Day.
launched Barack Obama to the presidency of the United States.
Thank you, Iowa.
And we just witnessed another dramatic change in Des Moines and in Washington.
It's clear tonight who the winners really are.
Here we go again.
When they say, yes, we can, we say, oh, no, you don't.
The party is over.
I'm concerned that the partisan rancor is only going to continue and get in the way of our country's progress. I learned from my mentor, Ronald Reagan, the importance of getting along.
And I've spent a lifetime working with and supporting Republicans and Democrats.
A value that has only been reinforced in my fight for civil rights.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
I'm Fred Karger. I'm an independent Republican.
I'm Fred Karger.
And I'm in Iowa because I'm seriously considering running for president in 2012.
Karger.
Welcome to Iowa.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have
Very
you
nice
here.
to meet you.
But before I run for president, I need your help.
Hi, Fred. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Just wanted to drop by.
I'm testing the waters in Iowa to see if I can raise some funds for my friends.
Fred Karger, Independent Republican.
Oh, good, so am I.
That will help determine the next step. Please go to fredkarger.com.
Check out the website.
It was nice meeting you.
Hey, nice meeting you.
Sign up and make a contribution today. Thanks, Iowa.
So, what I do is a limited television buy, and that ran in Iowa for a week on Fox. It was a 90-second commercial. The first one was a little closer. I think we'll show one more, Kevin. Don't go too far. And so this is kind of the type of exploratory effort I'm doing, is to get the commercials out. Thousands and thousands of hits on YouTube. A lot of people are posting them on Facebook. There's one more I want to show, which is that newsy.com. And what I read in David Pluff's book on Obama was, all the digital media and how they really innovated that in fundraising and campaigning and, social networking. Well, now, just, 3 years later, that's changed dramatically. And so we're taking advantage. And, this piece this is a new web news service that kind of takes stories and puts them into a great newscast. And, these are the kinds of things. So, we go viral with these. We put these on our website. We put these, Facebook and all that. And this is a great piece that kind of shows what I've been doing. And again, this just kind of came out of nowhere.
A little more than a month after midterm election campaign ads went off the air, Iowa voters are getting a taste of 2012 with the first TV spot from a 2012 presidential hopeful.
I'm concerned that the partisan rancor is only going to continue and get in the way of our country's progress. I learned from my mentor, Ronald Reagan, the importance of getting along. I'm Fred Karger. I'm an independent Republican.
Fred Karger is an openly gay Republican who says he's seriously considering a 2012 presidential run. If he does, he'd be the first openly gay candidate to run for president from a major political party. It may sound a little early to be kicking off a potential campaign, but for a dark horse candidate with almost no name recognition, Sunshine State News says he needs a running start. Karger tapped Nathan Traylor to serve as his director in Iowa. Traylor has more than a decade of experience working as communications director of the Republican Party in Iowa. Karger says he's looking to raise $5 million and has worked on the campaigns of President Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and Gerald Ford. Still, the Iowa Independent calls him a long-shot candidate. He has never served in elected office. He is also openly gay and has worked as an activist to support efforts for same-sex marriage in California and opposed that state's Proposition 8 measure.
And I've spent a lifetime working with and supporting Republicans and Democrats. A value that has only been reinforced in my fight for civil rights.
Karger has been a vocal supporter of gay rights, calling out the Mormon Church for its support of a 2008 ballot measure in California to ban same-sex marriage. And a writer for Care 2 says running with an R behind his name is likely to be a challenge. With a party who just filibustered Don't Ask, Don't Tell legislation and consistently campaigns against same-sex marriage, redefining the Republican Party would likely be an understatement. If Karger runs, he'll likely face a growing crowd of high-profile contenders with better name recognition. But Charleston City Paper's Greg Hambrick says Karger's run would force his opponents to clarify their positions on an issue he cares a lot about. A debate would not only challenge the anti-gay positions of likely candidates like former Senator Rick Santorum, Representative Mike Pence, and former Governor Mike Huckabee, but it would put frontrunners like former Governors Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin on the record regarding equal rights. Karger says he knows he faces an uphill battle, but he told Radio Iowa he's a fighter. For Newsy.com, I'm Christina Hartman. Multiple sources, the real story.
So you can kind of see the pattern here. You do a commercial, which had great production value, I think, both of them, but the second one, and then, news associations pick them up and organizations, and, they ran that commercial again practically in its entirety. So, without the big budgets that the other potential candidates have, we need to be very smart and clever and do things like that. And with the digital media now, everything has changed and it's very inexpensive. So that's something we're looking to do. I'm going to make a couple more points. I want to make the announcement and introduce a couple people. And then, she referred to in that news spot, that I want to get in the debates. I have a goal. People say, are you going to win? And I'm going, I'm probably not going to win. Anything can happen, but my goal is to get in the debates. And there are forums and debates last time, 19 of them around the country, and the Republican side only. And so Kevin Minitor on the right with a tie is my research director, and a lot of traveling aid and all kinds of things, and good friend. And he's put together a whole list of debates. There are 19, and he's talking about you. And 19 last time. And what's interesting is of the 19, each has its own criteria pretty much. And if you notice, it said in Iowa, Fred has hired Nathan Treloar as his state director. Well, Nathan used to be the communications director at the Iowa Republican Party, and somebody I'd worked with at the state fair where a lot of that footage was, great guy. One of the requirements of the Des Moines Register debate is you have to have a staff person in Iowa. You have to have an office there, and you have to be at 1% in the polls. So, you know, I'm working toward the various requirements of these debates and forums. And that's one of the big efforts I'm undertaking. And if I can get in a debate, and we saw it with Ron Paul, you know, everyone wants a breakaway moment, you can no telling what can happen. So that is my goal, and we are working very closely toward that strategy. I've been excluded from the first one, which is a presidential forum in Iowa, and I'm just launching a website probably next week called letfredin.com, and it's going to be used on that and other things. And I faced a couple other hurdles, and this guy who's organizing the one in Des Moines, his name is Steve Scheffler. He sent me an email last May after I'd been in Iowa and had one of my town hall meetings there. He threatened me in an email. He said, you and the radical homosexual community, you know, suit, are not welcome in Iowa, and I'm going to work overtime to abort your candidacy. And, you know, I released that to the Des Moines Register, who ran a front page story and got me a lot of support. In that article, they interviewed probably 4 or 5 people from the Democratic Party, Republican Party, education, this LGBT organization, who basically said, you know, anybody should be welcome in our caucuses here. We shouldn't discriminate. And kind of all came out against this guy. Well, now he's, of course, coincidentally, the first guy sponsoring a forum. March 7th, he told the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago, everybody's welcome in this forum. Anybody who's shown the slightest interest in running for president in 2012 on the Republican side will be invited. Well, I'm waiting for my invitation. Well, guess what? Steve Scheffler didn't invite me. And I sent him a letter, and I released it, and I said, I've probably shown the greatest interest, and I have. You know, I'm the first to hire a state director, the first to have a town hall meeting, the first to run commercials. I've been there 5 times, and, you know, here 10 times at that point. So anyway, he's making a point to exclude me because I'm gay. And I guess that's why I was in the closet for 30 plus years. I didn't face any problems, but I've had it. I'm fighting back. I'm 60 now. I'm fine, but there are a lot of people who are not. There are a lot of younger people who are facing horrendous lives and teen suicides. There's an epidemic, not just LGBTQ, but a lot of people, but particularly them that are bullying and being bullied and everything. So I'm doing this for a bigger purpose, to set the record straight that, you know, you can do anything you want to do. I mean, you can even consider running for president. So I've been hearing a lot from a lot of younger people, from very young kids too, 12, 13-year-old kids who are emailing me or Facebook messaging me about what this has meant to them, and this is why I am standing here. And this is what I said when I started my activism in 2008, my first interview. I said, I'm doing this for younger people. I'm fine now, completely comfortable with my life, but I haven't been for many years, and it took me a long time to get to this point. I am taking on some issues, and I've said when I first announced my intention back in New Orleans in April 10th of last year, that I want to not just list my white papers and positions on my website like I've done for many candidates before, taken positions, come up with, you know, a couple thoughts. I want to kind of put some of that aside, and I will, and I have had positions and discussed and everything. We are getting ready to launch those. That's a job of the research director, and he's been doing a hell of a job. But I said at that time in my statement, I want to come up with bold new ideas. And, you know, as a political consultant, that's what our job was. You know, we'd have a candidate, we know what that's like, you know, and we would come to the candidate with some bold new ideas, and, you know, it's up to the candidate to accept or dismiss those. And so my first bold new idea I would like to announce here today, and I am advocating, and I want to do it here at Dartmouth, the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. George W. Bush tried to put a 28th Amendment on the Constitution, which was to write, you know, no marriage, same-sex marriage into the Constitution, and he used that, you know, rather successfully in his reelection campaign. But what I want to do is, with my 28th Amendment, encourage participation, not take away rights, but extend rights. To 16 or 17-year-olds, the right to vote. And it's been talked about a little bit. It's never been discussed at the presidential level, but I want to discuss it. And I would like to help lead that crusade, because I have great faith in younger people. I've looked for some things to further involve younger people in the process. It actually happened in a discussion with a guy about 27, 28 years old, which is what triggered this. A couple months ago, he said the most, and he's in New Hampshire, down in Karger, he said the most I've ever been involved, the best and smartest I've ever been in voting was in 2000 when I was in high school, and we learned about the primary. And I knew everything about everybody, and I've never voted that intelligently ever since. And his high school class, because of course it's here, paid particular attention to that primary. And he learned a tremendous amount. And I have great faith in 16 and 17-year-olds. I mean, they're driving, you know, a lot of them are working, and I have a lot more faith in many of them than some of my contemporaries. But I think we should open up the process, because, you know, and I don't know how many people are registered here. I assume a lot are, if you're interested in coming to hear me, but there are a lot who aren't. And voter registration is low and has always been low, and we've tried everything, and Rock the Vote, which I'm a big part of and have their widget on the homepage of my website. I've met with them, and I'm trying to do everything I can to encourage participation. I think this is a tremendous solution to that, because if we encourage 16 or 17-year-old, I think for some, you know, one of my other big issues, or my main issue, is education and education reform and making school more interesting. I was not a good student. I didn't like school. This is Jeannie Andelman Brown, who I grew up with, who now lives here, might speak to that. We reconnected through our reunion this last year. She's head of raising money for Dartmouth Hitchcock here, and it's great to see her. And so she may remember I was kind of a goof off in school, and as I say, not a great student. I was just not that interested. If I'd had a class about, you know, in high school about, you know, voting, and I was allowed to vote, I guarantee you I would have gotten an A in that class. And if we can engage that many younger people in this process, and it's not a mock election, and I voted in a number of those, if I knew I had that responsibility, and I think a lot of younger people around, and by our estimations, there are about 10 million, you know, 17-year-olds and 10 million 16-year-olds. And I'm going to open it up to a little discussion, and this is, again, where I'm making this announcement, and I'm going to be talking about this for a long time. And I'm hopefully going to find sponsors in Congress, and I think we need to move this ball rolling. When I was 21, that was the voting age. It was not 18 then. I was 21 in 1971, and I got to vote in 1972. And it was a very exciting time for me, and I was working on a United States Senate race then. So it was particularly, and I was very informed, and I loved it. But right after that is when the 26th Amendment to the Constitution passed, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. And that was when Vietnam was going on, and the big argument then was, you know, if they can fight for our country, they can vote, which is a very, you know, reasonable, logical argument. And that amendment was the quickest amendment to ever pass. You know, it takes 3/4 of the states, 2/3 of both houses, the president's signature or not, but it passed in 5 months, in record time, and has been the law of the land. But other countries have that. Austria has it, Brazil have it, you know, not a lot, but America, you know, we invented democracy, and I think we should extend it to others. And I think, you know, to have younger people participate when they're in high school, and encourage school districts and principals and classrooms, and, you know, to follow these much more closely, to bring in speakers who are running for office. And when people have the vote, suddenly candidates will be going to high schools. Right now, they don't. Why? Because there are no votes there. You know, maybe their families, or, you know, if some states, you know, like in New Hampshire, if you turn 18 by the general election, you can vote in the primary, but that's an unusual rule. So anyway, that is what I would like to talk about. I think it's important. I think we need to do it now. I'm going to be meeting with members of Congress. If any of you have any ideas, and maybe we could put a kind of a sidebar effort together to this. I've been giving it a lot of thought. I've done my own little focus group testing, informally talking to a lot of people, younger people, older people. I've heard everything. It is not widely accepted. Everyone kind of has a reason, but I go back to Earl, bartender, at the Centennial who told me that story, and he was so passionate and so kind of regretting that he didn't have that level of information about voting now that he had when he was in high school, and they're focusing on it. And I have great confidence that that would be a very successful and controversial amendment, as all constitutional amendments are. There have been hundreds, but I want to announce it today. You heard it here first. I'm going to be doing a press release about it, and I'm very excited about it, and I want to make it part of my campaign if I run. The other issues I'm very concerned, as I said, education, reform. You know, we sit here today at an incredible institution. You know, you are the few that made it through high school. 1 million high school students drop out every year. I'm sure many of you didn't even have that opportunity. I mean, through your families or your own desire to succeed, you didn't have that. Unfortunately, 1 million kids a year do. And I don't know if you've seen Waiting for Superman, which is an incredible documentary that really is going to help wake up America to this and how we need to reform education. Every president wants to be the education president. A lot have done wonderful things. I've been meeting with experts, again, outside of the box, not the traditional ones. Kevin and I met with a lot of the foundations, the Eli Broad Foundation, the head of that, Dan Kidzar, who they've spent $357 million to learn about how to reform education and come up with a lot of new ideas, which will be in our education platform. And immigration reform is another issue that I'm very concerned about. I live in Southern California. I've lived there for 37.5 years. It's a big part of the state there, not as much here, but I'm for a pathway for citizenship. My ancestors came here, in hope of a better life. Most everyone's in this country did. And these are people who've come across borders illegally for a better life for themselves and, more importantly, for their kids. And I think we need to find a solution to the 13 or 14 million illegal citizens that are here. I think we should include them in the process and be able to, have the taxes and have them live without looking over their shoulder. I think the Arizona law is reprehensible. It sends a terrible message to people who have come here. Obviously, breaking the law, but the immigration laws are relatively new. There were none really before the 1925, 1926 in this country. If you were white and European, you could pretty well come here without any rules. And so I want to be compassionate in that regard, and I think we need to work on that. And of course, the number one issue in the country is the economy and jobs. And I've come up with a term called jobs first. And I'd even like to open that up for discussion, because I think we need, there's automation is incredible. You go to a supermarket now and you're often checking out yourself, or drugstore, or the ATM, or the airport. Jobs are leaving because machines are taking them over, and I guess that's a good thing, because that's progress. But it's unfortunate because so many of our fellow citizens are losing their jobs. But the outsourcing is something that I want to try and come to grips with. And to that end, I'm meeting with a lot of experts there, because we're losing so many jobs. And I had a friend with a very big company, and he was in the IT department. And his job was to go outsource their IT department. And he ended up, after a year and a half of travel and meetings, well, half those jobs, 30,000 jobs all over the United States, half went to Poland, half went to India. And they turned 30,000 into 40,000. But with free internet, free phone, a great desire to work for a lot less money and less benefits and less regulation, all those jobs have left this country like that. It was announced one day, and all those lies affected. So I want to put a group together, and I've been meeting with experts, and I like to concentrate on young, smart people who have new ideas, and I'm trying to set up some meetings. I just was a professor at the Booth School of Economics at the University of Chicago, which helped lead the way in economics for many years. And so I'm trying to develop new ideas to transform our economy and help at least have a say in what is being discussed out there, because that is our number one problem. And my biggest beef with Obama is that, other than I was actually a Hillary Clinton supporter, and like a lot, I was a little bitter, but I moved on, went to his inaugural and everything. Well, he pledged to work on nothing but the economy for the first 2 years. Well, he worked on it for the first 2 weeks, passed stimulus, and then went to health care and a lot of other issues. Well, had he focused on the economy for the first 2 years and had turned it around, which, one man, you wonder, what can he do? Well, the president has that bully pulpit. He can do what Reagan did. That's what I was talking about. He had that spirit, and he had upbeat, positive attitude. I like to say he talked us out of the recession in the 1980s, which was very similar to this, with inflation being far worse and unemployment about the same, and a lot of the similar problems. But he had that can-do spirit, that optimism, which of course I thought Barack Obama had. We saw what a brilliant campaign he ran. But he's now said he's going to spend the next 2 years, since he didn't spend the first 2 years. So I'm going to hold him to his word, and I think he's committed now, because he got a pretty loud and clear message. So anyway, those are 3 issue areas I want to talk about and discuss, and then this whole new, bold new idea of lowering the voting age. And I would like to introduce John Lose, who is in the sweater, not the tie, who is our Dartmouth coordinator and has been for many months, and has been a huge help in setting up a lot of these meetings and working here. And he's going to be organizing these walks, and he helped us with the commercial we're doing and all kinds of things. It's an exciting exploratory committee. It's going to be fun, inclusive. I want a lot of younger people. I want to, make this historic, which it will be if I do run as the first openly gay candidate ever. I've gotten a lot of international coverage already, which is kind of interesting. Actually, a Hungarian story, which I had translated, which I heard was very good. But this is news all over the country. I mean, Australia, it's been reported, because this issue is very topical. And of course, to do something like this, and as a Republican, it makes it even more ludicrous. There's a story today in the Concord Monitor that said, gay Republican is not an oxymoron. Well, I'm not a moron. Some might assume I am, but it is an oxymoron, because the Republican Party, as we said there, has kind of led the way, or she said, led the way in anti-gay activities. With that, if there are any questions, any discussions on lowering the voting age, I'd be happy to entertain them. And thank you very much again for having me here. And this is always a pleasure to come to Dartmouth, and afraid you're going to be seeing a lot more of me. So thank you very much. Any questions? Actually, you can slam the Frisbees together or something. You do that. Any questions, any comments? Okay.
What did you learn from working on the Reagan campaign that you think could kind of be a model for today's Republican campaigns?
Well, I kind of referenced it in that, in the commercial. Reagan, the world's nicest guy. He just was. And like Nelson Rockefeller, and I was talking about my experiences with him earlier, Nelson Rockefeller, Ronald Reagan were just these people. He generally loved people, and I'm kind of like that. I like to go in, I enjoy that. I love that. My most exciting, fun day of this entire 11-month escapade has been at the Iowa State Fair, and there's a lot of coverage in the Iowa spot. I mean, literally met thousands of people. I had a great time. It was fun. Well, Reagan got along with people. The Speaker of the House then, and when he came in, was a big Democrat named Tip O'Neill, in stature and importance and everything, and Irish. They were both Irish. Well, Reagan would invite him over to the White House, and they'd have a beer together. They became friends, and that affability, that likability, his willingness to get along. He was very conservative. So a lot of Democrats, like Teddy Kennedy people, didn't necessarily like his politics, but they liked him. And so that's how he was able to get the tax cuts done and the stimulus then, to stimulate the economy, not a stimulus, but that affability, that likability, that reaching across the aisle. And that's what is important. And I think that was one of his greatest successes. And, he was very headstrong, on a lot of issues that America was completely opposed to. And he never gave up. He would stick with his position, and people respected him for that too. We're seeing now, particularly with polling, where politicians will kind of move and sway and change their positions, and everyone needs to. It comes with the territory, You do change your mind, and you do have to change with the time. But it's important that that you stick consistent in your beliefs. And I've had people, on some of my issues, I'm much more moderate, and you can't do that, you can't run like that. Well, I am what I am. I've got nothing to lose. I'm in a little different position than these other people that are looking at it. But that ability to stick to his positions, not to move with the wind, and then also to reach across the aisle, get along with people, I think are his greatest attributes. Plus, obviously, the great communicator. If you studied him at all or saw what he do, I mean, that guy could give a speech. and he's an actor, and so that helps. Anything else? Yes?
Sorry to be going way back, but when you're talking about the Horton ad, I found that really interesting. I'm a government major, and in 3 of my classes I've heard about and studied the Willie Horton ad. And it's pretty much considered the exemplar of race baiting and the epitome of misrepresentation. So I was wondering why, what was your role in that? For example, and one thing that I always find interesting is his name was William Horton, but they chose to call him Willie Horton. And I don't know if you guys have seen their 2 ads, but you should definitely look them up on YouTube. They're really interesting. So I'm just wondering what your role in that was. I'm just surprised you bring it up because while obviously those victims, it's terrible what he did, it's just in politics considered like race baiting, 101.
Well, it's a very good question. Yeah, and let me clarify, because there is a little confusion. There were 2 separate independent committees out there. One made an ad which was a very racist ad, and it had a very unattractive picture of Horton and a revolving door about justice. That was not our organization. That was another committee, a very conservative committee from Virginia. Ours took a different tact. We never showed his face. We did mention his name. It was a verite spot, which is just close up of these individuals, the victims. Cliff Barnes, who been terrorized by Horton, and then the sister of Joey Fournier and Donna Cuomo. And it was just their first person talking about Dukakis. It really didn't even mention Horton. It showed his liberal philosophy. It really indicated that, and that was our role, not to show the prisoner and a revolving door, which was race baiting, I think, and there was a lot of controversy. Ours, it was interesting. The night, 3 nights before the election, our job was pretty well over. I'm watching Nightline, which was a big show then with Ted Koppel. It hadn't been on that long, and anyway, and there's Dukakis as the guest, and Ted Koppel goes, "I'd like to show you, a couple commercials, Governor." And I was like, what? And all of a sudden there are 2 commercials on there, and we didn't have much money. It's very similar to this. We didn't have much money to air them, but there it was on Nightline, and he was just speechless. I mean, and these spots were very good. I don't know if those are on YouTube. I should probably put those up. Very different approach, using these victims, using the verites to tell this story. And we've done a lot of verite spots, which are the first person, real people talking in a lot of campaigns, not just crime victims, but just, real people talking. And it's obviously still done today. It was another kind of Bill Roberts creation, as opposed to just the talking political head like we saw here. But it was very common. So yeah, that is interesting. And that that Willie Horton still to this day, that so many people who weren't born when that was a prominent commercial, but it did impact the election, and I don't believe in censorship. On political ads, we've had many commercials that have been turned down. I've run some newspaper ads just recently, kind of going after. The Mormon Church on their involvement in gay marriage. I ran a campaign called The Mormons Are Coming, The Mormons Are Coming, to warn New England about what they did in California and what we found out and what I found out with all these documents. And 3 of the capital newspapers, the Concord Monitor ran it, but the Augusta Kennebunk Journal did not, which is for Augusta. I ran them in the 6 capitals. It was called The Mormons Are Coming, The Mormons Are Coming. It had kind of a Paul Revere guy, and then I rewrote The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, and actually it was a feature in the Washington Post that triggered a story, and they didn't like that. They thought it was anti-religion. Well, I don't think it is. I think that this religion needs to get out of their battle to take away rights. They've been funding everything. They've been leading the charge, this National Organization for Marriage that spent $1.5 million to try and get rid of your governor. I call it overthrow the government of New Hampshire. They did it in both houses. They flipped them from Republican to from Democrat to supermajority Republican, and one of the first things they've announced, and we'll see what happens, is they are going to take away marriage. Maybe they won't take away marriage, but my on the ground people have said yes, they will. They have to by law. The bills have been introduced. There will be a vote on the floor. So I know there were a lot of unhappy people with that ad. I was unhappy. It kind of tarnished our image and reputation, even though we had nothing to do with it. I think that was inappropriate, but I believe in the political process and that freedom that people can make that ad, and that some people will see it and think it may cost Bush votes or something. But I don't believe necessarily in censorship in advertising, and so that was one of the results. I would not do something like that, though. Any thoughts on the 16, 17-year-old voting? Yeah.
I was going to ask about that. So it's interesting. I was able to vote the same year I turned 18, luckily enough. It was the last presidential election year where Obama won. And it's interesting because I don't know whether I was well informed. I mean, I followed the campaign very closely, but since I came to Dartmouth, since that election, I've learned some stuff about economics and policy that I didn't know back then, and maybe would have impacted how I would have voted. So, and I don't know whether all 16 and 17-year-olds in high school have the kind of knowledge to make them an informed voter. So I was wondering what you think about the idea of essentially voter literacy tests. That to register to vote, you have to take a test to show that you're familiar with the basic Constitution, structure of the U.S. government, that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that they banned in the 60s because it was only being given to black people to stop black people from voting. Obviously, that's not okay. But what would you think about giving something like that to everybody as a condition of being able to vote at a younger age?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm always amazed as a political consultant and talking to the public and moving public opinion on how smart people vote. And California, we pretty much invented and the initiative process out there, which is highly complex. Usually initiatives are put on by special interests. I know because I've worked for some that have put them on. And they're always selfish. They're to benefit the sponsor. And they're very complex, and sometimes we'll have 15 or 20 initiatives on, along with the president's race or the governor's race or Senate. I mean, all these legislative and judicial. I mean, it's a huge ballot. And I would say just about every time the public generally makes very informed decisions. And these are people who are not focused. And I'd put a good 16 or 17-year-old who is in school and studying and learning and much more focused than somebody who's at a job and distracted or raising a family and everything. But the public, I have great faith in. What I want to do is get the numbers up. We still have much lower voter turnout than many industrialized countries. You can go to the extreme like Australia that requires voting, or there's a fine. They have about 95% turnout. I don't think we should do that. But I think we need to get politicians that are going to excite people to vote more. But I think if we start people young and get them registered, and in the schools, with most states, every state there except 2, you can register by postcard, you can register online. It's very easy. And in California and many states, you have what's called a permanent absentee. You don't have it here. All you have to do is when you register, you just check a box, and forever until you move, that ballot will arrive at your house. And so that increases voter turnout because, election day and, late for work or late for school or late home or the kids so I'm all for encouraging turnout. I'm all for encouraging, more voters. But I think a literacy or an exam or something, sometimes you get a little frustrated. Certainly on losing campaigns, I wish, we'd done that, but I'm kidding. But I think that the process works. I have great faith in the American public, and certainly we're more informed now, thanks to this thing, than we ever have. Jean.
It's great to hear you speak, by the way. It's wonderful, and I'm thrilled that you're doing this. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go, but I did want you to know that you're kind of talking about increasing voter turnout, not just for 16 and 17-year-olds, but you do know that New Hampshire Republicans are about to try and take away the vote from the college students. So you could work on that.
Yeah, I just found that out. And actually we're talking to Josh, who's with the CDs and the CLs, the Libertarians and Democrats about, and the CRs.
It's serious.
John, yeah, I know. I want to get involved. I think that's horrendous kind of thing. I mean, you should do everything to encourage just what I'm talking about. If I'm encouraging 16 and 17-year-olds to be able to have the right to vote, I certainly want college students to vote.
Well,
I think that's terrible.
About the fact that students are counted in the census. That's your reason for they should then be allowed to vote.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
It's not just an airy, gee, I think it's a good thing. Students are counted in the census, and they make a difference in how money is allocated all the way across. So that being so is a very good reason for why they should be able to retain vote. You've got to work it out because, as you said, there's a supermajority in New Hampshire.
Yes. Well, there's a little good news from there. I'm going to debut this commercial tomorrow. It's Fred Karger versus Brian Brown, who's the head of the National Organization for Marriage. We've been battling for 2.5 years. We're going to go at it again. And we were in a 6th grade play together. This is Tinkerbell. I was Father Darling, if you can guess the play. I will. Thanks, Gene. Thanks for coming. This has been, of course, Facebook, for a guy like me, reconnecting with all kinds of people. But we all turned 60 this year reunion. And so it was cute. She back and forth and all the different emails. You get all these group emails, and there was one from Gene Andelman, now Brown, and said, I can't come into Chicago, but if anyone's ever in New Hampshire, look me up. Well, we were having breakfast at Lou's about a week later. So it's fun. All kinds of people are coming forward. It's been an interesting exercise. People, that have known me my whole life are quite surprised, understandably, out of the blue. Why don't you run for city council? Why don't you run for maybe Congress? Or, what are you doing? I learned from the wife of my grandfather who went here, start at the top. And I've kind of followed that position. If something goes wrong at AT&T, call the CEO's office. Don't start with the buttons you're pushing. Go to the top and work your way down. And so I guess I'm following that a little bit. I want to make a big difference for this country, which I care very deeply about, for my community, which I'm very concerned about. I want to be at the table. I think that it's important for the Republican Party, for a lot of people, that they've got hope, they can do anything. I want to encourage people, I want to involve people, I want to help the process, make it fun, give everybody a Frisbee, t-shirt, spread the good cheer. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody. John, thank you very much for putting this together. This has been a great day. We were here earlier. We're off to a town hall meeting in Keene. You saw some footage from the first one. It's at Margarita's, which I think you have one here too. And there's kind of a pattern. My Des Moines party was at Dos Rios. I'm from Southern California, so Margaritas. I want to make it fun for those of age who care about it, but I want to make it an inclusive, enjoyable, worthwhile, historic experience. And I'm going to be back here a lot. I want to get involved in just what Gene's talking about, that horrific bill to try and take away the rights of college students to vote. I mean, who in his right mind? Some of these Republicans and some Democrats are, should have some exams or something. But people are trying to reshape the electorate. I open it up, and may the best people win. I think we need to stand on our own merit. So anyway, this has been a joy. I thank you all for coming. This is very nice of you. This is great. This is very meaningful to me to be at Dartmouth, and I will be back. So thanks very much. I enjoyed it.